Ladies and gentlemen, actually, to be honest, for you it's a difficult part. The dark side is arriving. First of all, because we are just after lunch and you have to listen now to a presentation while digesting the very excellent food. And the second point, it's the topic. Actually, it's about cyber security and it's about cyber risks. Which seems to a little bit, let's say, worrying. On the other hand, I have to say that I will do it the other way than my colleague Dieter Pscheidl. I will start with the worrying part and I will show you afterwards the light. And you will see that there are a lot of opportunities in this field. Excuse me, I don't have the possibility to... But before I start, I think when talking about digitalization and insurance, what we already did the whole day so far is actually tackling all different issues. And I just tried to give some topics, some discussions, some work streams to put it here and to tell you, actually I was having the welcome speech I was talking about, it's the role of associations to structure a debate. And I tried to structure a little bit in just focusing now on one field, which is cyber security. And having said this, thank you very much. Having said this, I would suggest you the following, to talk about cybersecurity as such and give you an overview about the situation in Austria, and finally ending by also giving an overview of major activities on EU and European level. So, first of all, cybersecurity. Actually, what we also were discussing already is that our economy and our society is hugely depending on technological progress, which is for sure good for us, for the insurance industry, good for society, and it's a lot of benefits born. Nevertheless, this brings as well, of course, quite a number of risks for the economy, for businesses, and for individual lives. And of course, that's our role, the expert to mitigate risks, it's insurance companies. And I think where everything comes into play. And I want to show you here with 3 points where actually are dimensions for insurers in the field of cyber security. First of all, it's about awareness rising. So on a global level, we have a damage of about 261 billion euros. I think that's an official number. There might be other numbers. Anyway, I think it's a huge number, and I think the tendency is that this number is increasing. I just want to give you also an example. For example, there was the WannaCry ransomware attack. And just with this attack, there were 300,000 on a global level, 300,000 infected machines. And the global financial and economic loss amounted to about 3.4 billion euros, which shows the potential we have in this field when it comes to cyber risks. The second point I want to mention by awareness raising, it's of course, if there's awareness, I think we all have the same assessment that this has not come to the broader public as it should be, and there is a need for information campaigns. And it's for insurance companies, for insurers to do so, to make these campaigns. Not alone, also to ally with other stakeholders. And for example, what is happening is actually that insurance companies, the insurance industry, is also working with governments, for example, already in the field, or with other businesses in the field of critical infrastructure. Okay, that's about awareness raising. We come now, a second point is prevention. First of all, this has 2 dimensions. The first is the internal dimension. So also insurers are potential targets for cyber risks. We were discussing at the latest panel, actually, that this might be even, I think Mr. Thalmeier, you were mentioning, this might be even a risk why you don't involve as much as you might see the opportunity in this field. So we have to bear in this mind. That's something insurers have to care about. And of course, as a second part, there's an external dimension, which is all about actually the clients. And in this field, it's possible for insurance companies, of course, to help clients to achieve the highest possible level of cyber resilience. How this can be made? It can be made with additional services. It's very much about certification, for example, ISO certification. I've learned, for example, that in Germany, this certification is done by experts who normally deal with this, I don't know the English word, this water sprinkler systems or something like this, because they have the expertise into, so that they also do this IT risks, which is, I think, very interesting approach. And in the end, basically, it's to identify risk management practices, for example, with risk audits, also a role for insurance companies. But then, and I think the most present for us is actually the third dimension when it comes to a cyber insurance product. This cyber insurance product, it's actually a risk transfer mechanism, and it can be also actually combined with hotlines and services. So you have an incident of a cyber attack or something, you can call the insurer and say, please, can you help me? And there is a service of the insurer to help the client. If we look what are the covers or possible covers, how this is structured, there is first of all a possibility of a first-party losses. It's here about business interruption. It's about data asset protection. It's about cyber fraud potential products in this field, theft on intellectual property. And in the field of third-party losses, there are examples like privacy liability or network security liability. So in the end, we can have products which can be standalone products, or it can be products included in traditional policies. In any case, it's always the choice of the individual insurer to measure the risks. I think that's also an important point, that it's the choice of the individual companies. What are the challenges for insurers to develop an insurance product? First of all, it's the lack of available data in cyber incidents. And as a second part, as already mentioned, it's of course the lack of awareness of the importance of cyber security. And I will present you later on how these challenges can be tackled from the point of an insurance association. But now I would like to move firstly to cyber security and cyber risks in Austria. How is the situation in Austria? First of all, it's about the implementation of an EU Network Information Security Directive, the NIS, which should be done until May 2018. So that's a field where action is happening. A second point is that in Austria we have something like a cybersecurity platform, which is a cooperation between public institutions and the business community. Also having in background a little bit the critical infrastructure issue. And then we have something like a cybercrime competence center of the Ministry of Interior. And here it's very much about the preservation of evidence once an attack has happened and the registration of incidents. Question you might ask is, has there been anything happen so far in Austria? Yes, there has, like everywhere. And we had actually an incident which was very much mediatized also in Austria. You see it here on the last point. There is a supplier of aircraft manufacturers. It's FACC, working with Boeing and other aircraft manufacturers. And there was a CEO fraud with a damage of 15 million euros. So this was very much mediatized, and again you see here there's really an issue. To underline this issue, I would like to give you some numbers about cybersecurity in Austria. First of all, in 2016 we had about 13,000 complaints, which was a plus of 30% in comparison to 2015. There were about 1 million victims of cybercrime. The fastest growing complaints were in the field of damage of data, functioning of IT systems, hacker attacks, and cyber mobbing. And cyber mobbing leads also to a issue which is quite new. It's also that 72% of victims suffer of psychological damages, which is due to mobbing and theft of identity. If you look, for example, in what potential is, if you look on the Polish market in the field of MTPL, and you look on court rulings, and you look at psychological damages, this can be in the longer term also an issue. What is also important when looking at insurance products is actually what is the amount or the financial loss due, for example, here 2 examples, due to theft of identity. It was identified around with 1,200 euros per person. And when it comes to internet fraud, the amount would be 480 euros per person. The numbers actually come from a survey among around 400 SMEs or smaller businesses. So of course, these are just to give you a feeling what the situation is. Having said this, what we see, the clear tendency is that particularly businesses and smaller and middle-sized companies are increasingly targets number 1 for cyber attacks. This is an example how, for example, we as VVO cooperated with other institutions in order to raise this awareness, but I will talk about this later. But so all the things I mentioned now you can find here in graphs in German. And what I would like to present you as well is basically some numbers from a survey among 84 companies again. I don't want to read this out, but I think if you look through these numbers and percentages, I think even if you would make a survey among 500 companies, you would have a very similar result. What you can see with these numbers is that there's a huge demand for an insurance product and support services. I think this we can grant as a fact. Nevertheless, and there is the big but, nevertheless, we still have a very low insurance product penetration rate, I think not only in Europe, also in Austria. Let me tell you that among a survey among 400 companies with smaller companies like SMEs and one-person companies, there is an amount of about 82 or 73%, 73 for SMEs, who are not insured actually, not at all insured. And for a standalone insurance solution, the penetration rate is less than 10%, and the same is the case for co-insurance. So I think we have a problem at the moment, although it's mediatized a lot, of a very low penetration rate, I think not only in Austria, but also in Europe. I was now mentioning some issues with this insurance product, and now I would like to mention some activities an association, national association can do by the example of the VVO. What we did at the VVO is we were installing a working group cyber. And this working group, where several representatives of members are sitting, it was the task to develop, or it's about still in process to be done, the development of a non-binding sample insurance terms and conditions. It's to develop a risk questionnaire, and Dieter Scheidel was mentioning before, we have to be aware that only standardized data are of help. And we have to be very careful, and that's the reason actually why we try to develop something like this. And it's also about possible assistance services to cyber insurance products, and in general about the issue access to statistics. In this field, as VVO, we always try to engage with all stakeholders, with as many stakeholders as possible, to go all together in the same direction. And that's the reason why, for example, we have a very close cooperation with the German Insurance Association, the GDW, where, in my opinion, there is a huge know-how within GDW, most probably one of the leading players on European level. And when you see the DACH cooperation, it's also that we align with the Swiss association in this field. So we try to cooperate with others in the region. What else did we do? Awareness raising, important issue I was mentioning. So Basically, we were making a cooperation with the Austrian Road Safety Board, which is in German the Kuratorium für Verkehrssicherheit. It's actually dealing with prevention issues in Austria and is quite prominent in Austria. And we tried together to map basically cybercrime in Austria. In this field, we were, as you can see the picture, we were making a press conference, and within this press conference we were making also recommendations on measures individuals can take in order to protect themselves against cybercrime. The result was actually overwhelming because it was very, very much mediatized. So there was a huge interest, and I think we were like in the main evening news, there was a report about this press conference. So in Austria, we see from the broader public a very, very big demand for further information in this field and a huge interest. Another activity we were doing, again aligning with other stakeholders, we have a cooperation with the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, the WKO, and WKO was making a roadshow in all 9 provinces in Austria, and they were making online tests and checklists for SMEs on the level of IT security. We're writing an IT security handbook, which you can see very small down here, and doing other activities, again to align with other stakeholders in order to raise awareness. Having said this, I would move on to the European level and activities on EU level. Basically, here, what I can tell you is that Insurance Europe, our umbrella organization in Brussels, is also very active in this field, particularly in raising awareness. Insurance Europe has also established an internal working group and is making several activities. And of course, we as VVO, we actively contribute to all these activities. What I tried to raise your attention to is what also William Vidonia was mentioning this morning, that there is something like the elaboration of a GDPR notification template done by Insurance Europe, and I think that's a very important exercise. We more or less do the same as I was mentioning on Austrian level. Also, what happened in this field of raising awareness is that in October 2017, there was the Cybersecurity Month, and you can see it's about awareness raising. There were events organized all over Europe and also by Insurance Europe. I would like to finish now with actually giving a short overview in the end about other activities on EU level and, as it was mentioned, possible texts of reference. First of all, there is the review of the EU cyber security strategy, which was presented in September this year by the European Commission. Then I've already mentioned that there is the implementation of the Network Information Security Directive. It's more or less about security standards. Talking about cybersecurity standards, there the European Commission is planning to develop a certification initiative and still until the end of 2017. And of course, a huge issue for the insurance industry has also its lines or its touch points with the cybersecurity issue. It's the implementation of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which has to be done until May 2018, and it's particularly important looking at these templates. Then, last but not least, there is the European Network Information Security Agency, the ENISA, which holds several stakeholder workshops where also the insurance industry is participating. There was underdone a study on cyber insurance, and there are every 2 years on a biannual basis EU-wide crisis training done. So, of course, there are further initiatives, but this should give you, and I hope it was possible to give you a short overview about what is done in the field of cybersecurity. And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the field of cybersecurity and cyber insurance is still relatively young. A lot still needs to be done, but, and here is the light at the end of the tunnel actually, there's a huge potential for insurance companies who have to play an important role to mitigate the risks for the functioning of our economies, businesses, individual lives and societies. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.